an active and fun environment, they can do that at the presentation center in a safe way. Because of all of those things, no park property, Oceana included, ever had one positive case of COVID. We have always been COVID-free. As we move into the second year of operation, we will continue to expand all of our exciting programming, our outings and trips. We will flex in whatever way we need to make sure that whatever is coming down the pipeline, that we will stay ahead of the curve. I'm very excited to officially open the new presentation center as we celebrate our first anniversary. It's been a fun ride so far, and I'm looking forward to our second year. Thanks. And I am very honored to welcome Mayor Walker to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Shelley. And I want to echo your words. And it was Hugh that gave me this idea. Hugh will be giving you a presentation in just a wee bit. But he said, as we were sitting over there, you know, every time I've been here, it makes me feel more and more like this is a community already. And if you think about it, a year is a relatively short period of time for people to come together and start feeling comfortable with each other and who each other is and really start to build that friendship. So Hugh and Shelley, both of you, have hit it right on the nose. So I am Darrell Walker, the Mayor of White Rock. I'd like to begin by recognizing that we are standing on the traditional and ceded territories of the Semiahmoo First Nation and the Coast Salish people. On behalf of my colleagues on council, it's my pleasure to be here at the first anniversary of Oceana Park. I have had the opportunity to tour Oceana Park, and of course I held my first State of the City address as mayor here in November of 2019. The helpful staff here have made everything possible to make that particular breakfast that day a complete success. And I'm hoping that we'll have an opportunity for more State of the Cities right here at Oceana Park. This is a top-notch and wonderful location and a top-notch and wonderful organization. And before I go on with the words that I have here, a few of my own. Oceana Park, in the short time they've been in White Rock, has become an absolutely splendid partner for us to deal with. Shelley identified a number of things that Oceana Park has been involved in. And the one that I think I'd like to add to it, and we won't have this year, is Christmas. And very early into our term, we started reaching out to organizations to say, how can you help in a little way? And Tony and the partnership here said, well, that one looks like a good one. It's an uptown event. So we will not hold it this year, but we will certainly look towards holding it once again in 21. And so your website says that the location celebrates natural beauty and a revitalized seaside setting. What a beautiful spot to be able to come out and enjoy. It's a walkthrough, which this community needs more of. Pedestrian traffic, people to be able to enjoy getting out into your community, and that's what we ask you to do. And I'm, of course, pleased to see the commitment to the environment. And I understand that you're registered as a LEED certification and also a LEED certified gold. And I've had a little experience in my past realizing what LEED means and how hard and arduous and expensive, quite frankly, LEED is to attain. But once you get there, you are really a piece of the community that others will look up to. So congratulations on that particular part. And so you're part of a broader community here and part of White Rock's vibrant seniors community in an area that is continuing to grow and will be a splendid pace for seniors to enjoy over the years, whether it's walking to your local store or just coming out here to have a cup of coffee and perhaps a lovely Danish. We boast an active, engaged seniors population, people who participate in social events, physical activity, long-time learning, and many types of leisure activities. And while COVID-19 keeps us apart physically, we can continue to connect and are a community that cares. We enjoy life near the seaside and everything that White Rock has to offer. And so I'm wondering, are there any Clint Eastwood fans in the audience? Anybody out there that remembers Clint Eastwood? Well, I'm sure you would. I certainly do. And so as a fan of Mr. Eastwood movies and all that stuff, I would like just a small quote that he has left with us. It's one of many that Mr. Eastwood would have left with us. As we grow older, we must discipline ourselves to continue expanding, broadening, learning, and keeping our minds active and open. That is a message that I think each and every one of you continue to pass on every day as you're actively involved in your community and actively involved in the Oceana PARC community. I celebrate with you this event. You are a beautiful sight. You can absolutely believe that. From my heart, I am delighted to be here. Thank you. And Oceana PARC, thank you for everything you guys do for our community.
Thank you. And I'm actually even going to give this to Natasha so that Shelley and Mayor Walker can sanitize after holding on. So we are going to do a very special ribbon cutting ceremony right now to commemorate the first year of operation at Oceana and the grand opening of the presentation center, which I hope everybody has a chance to poke their head in and have a look. Once again, don't forget the pictures on the side there. They're part of the archives collection from White Rock, and you can bid any amount of money. It all goes to charity. So if I can ask Shelley to come back, and Mayor Walker, and Russ, who is our VP of Construction, and Natasha, our sales manager, and Andy, our sales associate. And who am I missing? Where is Kari? Kari is the VP of operations. I'm going to ask him to come forward. And if you guys can all come to the front of the podium, Andy and I are going to take the ribbon and drape it across the front of you. And Shelley, you're going to hold the mic. And Andy and I will take the ribbon. Outside. Shelley, you're behind it. Now, have you ever seen scissors this big? Okay, you guys in the middle there. Shelley, you want to jump in the middle with the gentleman to the outside? You're on the outside here. Okay.
One cut, no more. That's it. One shot.
Pressure.
Louise, are you going to count to three or what?
1, 2, 3. Thank you. Okay, thank you so very much. We're now going to bring our special speaker up. I'm just going to give the ribbon over to Andy. You've all been so patient. Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce Hugh Ellenwood. He's the archives manager at the White Rock Archives and Museum. Have you all been down at some point in your lives to see what's in there? It's a wonderful place. Great pictures. Hugh knows quite a bit about the history of White Rock, and so I'm sure you're really going to enjoy his presentation. If you find it's just a bit tough to see, don't worry, he's going to tell you what's there because he knows his presentation so well.
Thanks, Louisa. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me okay? Thank you, Shelley, and to all the staff here at PARC for inviting me to speak, and thanks, Mayor Walker. It's always a pleasure to see you. And great. So now that you're living here in this beautiful community, I'm going to tell you a bit about the history of it. And I'm going to start with pre-contact, before European contact. And as we are here on the unceded traditional land of the Semiahmoo First Nation, of course, history has to start with them. Now this is a map drawn by a man named Wayne Suttles, and he was doing his PhD at the University of Washington in the late 1940s, and he traveled all over the Pacific Northwest, and he spoke to First Nations elders, and he asked them, where were your habitation sites traditionally, and where were your principal resource sites for food, clothing, etc. And this is the map that he drew for the Semiahmoo people. Incidentally, when you are talking about the people, you say Semiahmoo, and when you're talking about the place, you say Semiahmoo. So here we see Boundary Bay, which was traditionally the place of the Semiahmoo, but you'll notice these dotted lines, half of Semiahmoo Bay, to people called the, they were very close to Semiahmoo, but in the sometime in the, they're not sure when, they were completely wiped out, and the remainder of the people folded into the, and the Semiahmoo to their territory, taking over the entire. They were known as a semi-nomadic people, straight Salish people, and by semi-nomadic, that means that they would go from place to place depending on the seasons to semi-permanent habitation sites. And the principal site was in the summertime or in the spring, where they would reef net salmon off Roberts Bank. And the salmon would come in the south of Boundary Bay, swim all the way around the bay, and then go out into the into the Salish Sea again, and then up to the mouth of the Fraser. And the Semiahmoo would intercept them here at the end of Point Roberts. And reef netting is when you create an artificial reef underwater using ropes and seaweed and stone weights, and you guide the fish into a giant net that's kind of like a purse with a drawstring at one end. Then you pull the drawstring closed, lift the net into a canoe, and then take all the fish to the bank on Point Roberts. And there they had huge processing sheds. And this is all before European contact. And there they would cure the fish, smoke it, dry it, and this they would be able to eat all year long. It was an incredibly important resource for them. And their society was also very class-oriented, from almost royalty, almost gods, down to almost slaves. And they were divided into families or clans. And these families would go by status. They would use the resource first and then pass their sheds on to a lower class family later on. This way of life existed for them for about 3,000 years. The last ice age ended about 11,000 years ago, and there's evidence of Coast Salish culture for about 3,000 years, the last 3,000. But this way of life ended almost overnight, within a century, with the arrival of the Europeans. The first European Semiahmoo Bay were the Spanish, an expedition led by a man named Jose Maria Narvaez, came to exactly the same location as that previous map I showed you, Boundary. He drew this map. The difference is that I thought that Point Roberts was an island, and this is probably because the Fraser River was flooding, or there might have been mist or fog, and they couldn't see Ladner or Delta. So the Spanish drew this map in 1791. They came back the next year hoping to survey and circumnavigate Vancouver Island, which they did in 1792, but they also ran in the expedition. And the British were there because they were trying to find the western entrance to the Northwest Passage. And they were also becoming interested in the area for the sea otter pelt trade with China. The Spanish had stayed down in California and Oregon since the 16th century, but with the coming of the late 18th and early 19th century, everyone started focusing on the Pacific Northwest. although the Spanish and the English were at war off and on with each other in the late 18th century, the meeting of the two groups was a really happy meeting. They really liked each other, and they cooperated intensely to produce this map. The brown areas, I know it's hard to see, surveyed by the Spanish and the red by the English. Well, by the middle of the 19th century, the other European powers, the Russians, the French, and the Spanish, had lost their influence in the Pacific Northwest, and now it was down to just the British North Americans and the United States. And one of the main events that brought White Rock to the world stage was a thing called the Pig War. And the Pig War in 1859 was a dispute over the exact path of the international border between the United States and Canada. And the Treaty of Oregon in 1846 said that that was the 49th parallel. And that's fine when you're on land, but when you get into the Salish Sea, you have to decide who gets the Gulf Islands. Well, it came down to the San Juan Islands, and on San Juan Island itself, the Hudson's Bay Company had a herd of pigs, and there were several American farmers. And the pigs got into one American farmer's potato patch, so he shot the pig. And then the Hudson's Bay Company came and arrested him, and then the Americans sent troops and got him out of jail. And then the British sent several thousand troops in a warship. And the two camps were the British were on the north end and the Americans on the south. And incredibly, the death of this pig was going to lead to war between these two huge nations. And then finally, the British commanding officer said, "This is ridiculous," and he started de-escalating things. But how this is significant for White Rock is that in order to survey the boundary, both nations sent engineers, the British Royal Engineers and the American military engineers, and they surveyed and created a road along the waterfront in White Rock, which about 50 or 60 years later, the railway would use as its railway bed. And that was called the Seafront Road. And in some ways, this is the beginning of European settlement in the White Rock area. So in the decades leading up to the Fraser River Gold Rush in 1858, Surrey was already well known for its great farmland. And you started to see a network of roads and trails intersecting across it. And then towards the later 19th century, you start to see networks of first industrial, mainly logging railways, and then passenger and freight railways. And the railway we're concerned with is the Great Northern Railway that went through central Surrey and up to North Surrey, and then connected with a ferry at Brownsville to go to New Westminster. In 1904, the provincial government built a bridge across the Fraser that connected North Surrey with New Westminster. So then the Great Northern decided that they would shift their route from central Surrey, which was problematic because there were swamps and steep grades, and they shifted their route along the coast. And this was hugely significant for White Rock because suddenly we got the railway right on our beach. So you can't really see that at all. But this is a photograph of Mrs. Brown with her 3 daughters and camping in White Rock on an encampment that has a wooden foundation with a canvas top. And this photograph was taken in 1910, a year after the railway arrived, but it really demonstrates well what camping in White Rock was like before the arrival of the railway. It was very basic. It was usually done by people farming in the surrounding community, and they would take a wagon and maybe a cow to provide fresh milk, and they'd go to White Rock for 2 or 3 weeks or a month maybe, and the dad would go back and forth to the farm to make sure everything was okay. Well, after the arrival of the railway, the White Rock's first railway station was on Marine Drive at about Anderson Street, and that was built in 1909. When the railway came, that changed everything. It meant that you could easily and quickly get, say, a kit for a small cottage sent to you in White Rock, and then you could build that cottage. You could bring food or family, relatives. The railway really changed everything. But in this photograph, you'll see there's a huge crowd beside the very small station. And the station in White Rock quickly became too small and obsolete. So they built a second station, which you may recognize. This is where the museum is today. It's the station on the waterfront. And this was built in 1912 and officially opened on New Year's Day in 1913. And so now we start to see cottages like this one coming up in White Rock. And there are still quite a few of these left, although they're diminishing in number. But in the later teens and the early 20s, these were popping up everywhere in White Rock. And it was usually a family that was fairly well-to-do in New Westminster, Vancouver, or Seattle. And they would build a cottage in White Rock and they would stay in it in the summertime and then go back to work in the winter. In the meantime, the dad, who would be working in the city all through the summer, would commute back and forth on the weekends. And this was such a common thing that the railway even had a train nicknamed the Daddy Train that brought all these guys to White Rock. So the railway station was incredibly important in the community. You could get everything from a haircut to medical attention. They had fire prevention. You could send a message anywhere in the world. You could buy a ticket to travel anywhere in the world by just going to this railway station. And it had an effect on the planning, the urban structure of the community. Now this photo, I'm skipping ahead a bit in time. It was taken in 1930, but it really shows well how the railway affected, it was kind of like a magnet drawing all of the buildings towards it. And the newspaper advertisements of the day, the businesses never put their exact street address. It wouldn't have meant anything to anyone. They would always say, we're in White Rock, we're on Marine Drive, and we're opposite the depot. And you can see they're all straining to be opposite the depot. So the railway was incredibly important in the early days, and everyone valued it greatly. It meant local prosperity, and it benefited the community, the immediate community, greatly. So aside from the railway station, you start to see other infrastructure coming to White Rock after the railway arrives. This is White Rock's first school, built in 1910. But just like the railway station, it quickly became too small for the rapidly growing community. So a second school was built in 1914 up on the hilltop. And you may remember this school, some of you. It was torn down in 2014, I think. And then finally followed by the Semiahmoo High School in 1941. Now the railway was a facilitator for economic growth, but one thing that really was a catalyst to it, that created it, was the Campbell River Lumber Company mill. It's not commonly remembered anymore, but this was one of Western Canada's largest lumber mills, and it was located at the mouth of the Little Campbell River. And if you go down there today, you can still see all kinds of remnants, concrete foundations, pilings, and breakwaters, and so forth, all around where Semiahmoo Park is, and the old mill restaurant. That building was the office building for this mill, and it ran from 1913 to 1927. But one of the effects on White Rock of having this huge mill right adjacent to it was that White Rock got electrical power very soon. Community, and this is workers at the mill connecting the power. And White Rock, the permanent population of White Rock in 1910 was about 7 people, but in the summertime it swelled to 2,000 people. So there were all these cottages around, and they all got electric power, which was very unusual for the size of the community at the time. Now White Rock's pier is probably second or maybe even greater iconic structure for White Rock. And the idea for a pier in White Rock goes back to the 1890s. In fact, this is White Rock's first pier of any substance. It was about 300 feet long, it was right next to the rock, and it was just a floating plank pier that went out into the water so that larger vessels could moor. But it really wouldn't do for any very large vessels, ocean-going vessels. So a group of entrepreneurs and realtors invited the federal minister of fisheries and marine to visit White Rock in 1912. And they invited him when they knew it would be high tide. And he had to land on this pier. And by the time he got to the shore, he was soaked up to the waist. And he said, what this community needs is a really good, substantial pier. And they said, what a fine idea, Mr. Minister. So he appropriated $15,000, and that is the original origin of the financing for the construction of the original White Rock Pier. This is a lovely portrait of it taken in the late 1920s. The building next to the pier is the Great War Veterans Association meeting hall. And it's strange that for such a community-minded city, White Rock has never had an official municipal hall until quite recently. Traditionally, the communities relied on private organizations like the Legion to build the halls. They were unlucky with this building, though. It burned down in 1935, and they rebuilt it, and then it burned down again in 1970. So they haven't had much luck with the buildings next to the pier. Now, as we enter into the 1920s, White Rock is starting to become self-aware and quite proud as a community. And one of the manifestations of this is the White Rock Amateur Swimming Association, or RASA. And their motto was teach a child to swim and save a life. And you can imagine in the summertime, when the community swells from 10 permanent residents to 3,000, you get all of these kids running around on the beach, often unsupervised. And there's a danger of drowning, even on a nice, peaceful, shallow beach like White Rock. So this club was formed. White Rock was Edith Vidal. White Rock is named after. And they built a structure called the tank next to the pier. And the older kids would swim laps in the kids would stay on the beach and learn to swim there until the tank. But RASA was formed in still going today. It's a fabulous part of White Rock's history. The May Days were really popular throughout the Lower Mainland, and White Rock's first May Day was in 1923. This is another manifestation of the community spirit in White Rock. But by the late 40s, May Days were becoming kind of passé, and the last one was held in 1949. But this left a kind of a hole in the community. There was no way to demonstrate community spirit with a festival, especially in the summertime. But White Rock came up with the solution in the form of the Sea Festival shortly after. 1952, we had our first Sea Festival, and this is a photo of the parade at about Anderson Street in 1954. This Sea Festival was hugely successful in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and of course it's still going today as the spirit of the Sea Festival. Now, as White Rock grew and grew, we have a train station, we have a pier, we have schools, but White Rock had suffered several devastating fires in the late 20s and the early 30s. You can imagine wooden buildings packed cheek by jowl. There's a great danger for fire. In 1920-30, those two fires destroyed the entire waterfront along Marine Drive. So White Rock formed a volunteer fire department in 1933, and then there were fire stations at gas stations at the foot of Oxford Street and on East Beach and Marine Drive. And then this station was built in 1949 to serve White Rock and Sunnyside. It was where Semiahmoo Shopping Center is today. And strangely, when White Rock became a city in 1957, the city of Surrey turned this station over to White Rock, but it was outside the official boundaries of White Rock. And that was the state of fire protection in White Rock until 1992, when they built the station that we presently have. But I think the story that really best demonstrates the community spirit in White Rock, and you can feel it here in this building today, is the story of the building of the White Rock Hospital. In 1946, the Royal Columbian in New Westminster announced that they were overcrowded. They couldn't take any patients from south of the Fraser River anymore. So Surrey, and White Rock was still a part of Surrey at this time, Surrey had to build their own hospital. And they immediately formed a hospital auxiliary, and White Rock did the same. But soon the White Rock people found that the fundraising was going to go to a hospital that was going to be either in central or northern Surrey. And so they withdrew from that group and formed their own fundraising group. And this was in 1947. This hospital was built and staffed and operating by 1954. It's an incredible story of community spirit and fundraising and generosity by the people of the community. And White Rock really continues with that legacy of caring for its hospital. But still we have scenes like this. This is a very swampy, muddy road right in the middle of White Rock. In fact, this picture was taken right on Johnston Road, just outside this building in 1948. It was taken by a man named Eric Griffiths because he had a service station just outside the shot of the photo. It was called Midway Motors, and he was tired of having to gravel and grade and tow his customers into his service station. He wanted better services from Surrey for the people of White Rock. And many, many people felt this way. So this is a map of the ward boundaries of Surrey. Until 1956 in BC, municipalities were divided into wards, and they each got one councillor to supervise and champion that council. White Rock is way down at the bottom, Ward 7, and that shows the current boundaries of White Rock today. So that's how White Rock got its boundaries, is they just kept the original ward boundaries for when White Rock was in Surrey. And the way that the ward system worked was they tried to keep the total land value of each ward equal throughout the municipality. The effect that this had was that as your land value rose, the size, the geographic size of your ward shrank. So you see White Rock is the smallest ward by far, but it still has the highest land value. The only ward that rivals it is Riverview here, and Riverview has heavy industry. Well, what does White Rock have going for it? It has recreational ability. It has beautiful beaches, and it has the pier and the station. And this is what's driving the economy in White Rock. You could say it's driving the economy in White Rock today. But the people of White Rock were dissatisfied with the services they were getting from Surrey. And so in 1956, in November, they voted to separate from Surrey. It was extremely close. The yes side won by a mere 10 votes, but still they separated from Surrey and in April of 1957, White Rock became its own city. And this photograph was taken in 1958. And for all intents and purposes, it's pretty much the same as it is today. So we enter into the 60s now. The 60s were a time of great expectation for White Rock. Everyone was really, really excited for what the future would hold. This is the new City Hall, built in 1963. This is Central Plaza, was built in 1961. And Centennial Arena and the curling rink, built to celebrate the Centennials of Canada, Centennial of Canada in 1967, and the former Ruth Johnson Park was renamed Centennial Park on that occasion. So we see this kind of the center of economic gravity moving up from the beach onto the hilltop. But still, the waterfront was the heart and soul of White Rock. This is a photo of the pier in 1964. You can see the Dolphins restaurant right beside the pier. And many people who grew up here in the 50s and the 60s They remember the Dolphins as it was a fabulous seafood restaurant. It was served as everything from municipal hall meetings to sock hops, but unfortunately, it burned down in 1970. But there was a feeling that White Rock's waterfront was kind of losing its panache. It wasn't living up to what some people expected of it. So we start to see in the newspapers of the time some speculative projects like this for a huge hotel at the mouth of the Campbell River, or this one for a giant series of piers and jetties surrounding the existing White Rock Pier. And when Phil Ghilardi, the Minister of Highways, visited White Rock in the early 60s, he offered the services of the provincial engineers to build huge ramps that would go over the railway to parking lots that they would build on the waterfront in White Rock. Well, this didn't sit well with a lot of people. We started to see a reaction against this private recreational development and heavy industry in the case of the railway and the coal ports in Roberts Bank. And this is the Save the Beaches association, and they were on the front. They seemed like they're an environmental group, but they weren't. They were all about developing the beach, but they wanted it to be accessible, available to everyone, publicly available. And one of the tenets in their mandate was that they wanted to see a way to get rid of the railway from the waterfront in White Rock. And this, in the late 60s, we start to see this kind of attitude really championed. So this is a drawing from the newspaper in the late 60s, and it shows a proposal for building a causeway that would take the railway in White Rock off the beach and through Semiahmoo Bay. There was one proposal to dig a tunnel from Finley Street to High Street and get the railway to go underground all along the beach. But the only one of these plans that got any kind of traction at all was to move the railway back to the original 1891 Central Surrey route and take it off White Rock Beach. Well, this is a great idea for the people of White Rock, but for the people of Central Surrey, no, they didn't want the railway. White Rock has it, they can keep it. Thank you very much. And so it came down to the election in 1972. And if it was very complicated, but essentially if the Socreds won the election, then the railway would be moved. The NDP won the election, so the railway stayed in White Rock. And so by this time, the early mid-70s, Marine Drive in White Rock is starting to look a little run down. It's been neglected a bit for the development up on the hilltop, and some people are starting to be concerned. They're thinking, well, we have to do something about this. And even White Rock's iconic pier has been in such a state of disrepair that the federal government, who owned it at the time, decided that they were going to tear it down. They wanted to stop paying for maintaining it. Well, this created a huge outcry in the community, reminiscent or similar to what happened when the storms a couple of years ago destroyed the central portion of the pier. And there was a Save the Pier campaign in White Rock, and it worked. The federal government in 1976 stripped the pier down and completely rebuilt it, but there was one really important new factor. You couldn't drive your car on the pier anymore. You used to be able to drive, and it was built, always been anyway, it was meant only recreational promenade, stroll. And then along came, and on the left, Tom Kirsten with Chip Barrett. And these are the two guys who, Tom Kirsten was a city councilor in 1979. Barrett was an architect living in White Rock. These are the guys who came up with the idea of an open sandcastle competition. And they thought we need a way, we need some kind of festival or activity that can really showcase White Rock's primary resource, its beautiful beaches. And Tom Kirsten was a city councilor, and that's the crowds on the beach in 1985. for the sandcastle competition. I think the record attendance was something like 250,000 people. So I was there, it was literally standing room only on the beach. It was an incredibly huge crowd. In the end, the event was canceled the last one was in 1987 because the security costs were too high and there were problems with liquor laws as well. But Tom Kirsten ran for mayor in 1979 against Don McDonald, who was quite a conservative mayor, wanted to keep development very low. Tom Kirsten's slogan was, "Let's go downhill." His plan was to focus on the waterfront and take it from a rundown former city center downtown area into more of a destination featuring cafes and tourist-oriented businesses. And this is the policy that led to the development of the waterfront and the promenade and essentially what it is today through the mid-'80s and into the '90s. So thank you very much. I'll leave you there, and thanks. And if you have any questions, let me know.
So who has some questions? But before that, I want to know who has driven their car on the pier. Anybody? Are you sure that's for real? Oh, one person way back there. So any questions for Hugh? I can put the microphone near you. You can talk into it. You just can't hang on to it. Okay. Hang on, Hugh.
Oh, sorry. Hugh, that was a fantastic presentation. We've lived ourselves out here for 35 years.
Oh, great.
Now, it was so incredible, except we couldn't see anything. Now, would it be possible in several months, once we're over COVID, to have a repeat performance up in our room here?
Absolutely.
Yes. Did everyone hear that? A repeat performance? Shelley and I have talked about that once COVID has. But until that time, we did do a live feed. It's on YouTube, and we're hoping that Shelley and her team will be able to show it once again in the multipurpose room. Is that correct? Yes. Great. Good question. Anyone else have a question? I can bring the mic over. If you have anything, Hugh knows everything. So you can ask him anything. No one? No one's curious? Ben, got a question? No? Oh.
The White Rock Museum opened closed for the.
The question was, is the White Rock now? And we just opened. We can't open our gap because it only has one entrance, an entrance and exit. But and take a shop, or actually seeing some historic photos, then you can make an appointment to come and see me in the archives. Or if you just have a question about White Rock history and you want to send me an email, you can do that as well. Just go to our website. Yeah.
Shell, could it be added to the tour program?
It certainly will, Ken. As you know, we have certain protocols around numbers and whatnot, but we will work with Hugh and tee something up for sure. Also, it is such an interesting topic that, and we will air it upstairs, but once we are able, I would really like to be able to invite you again, Hugh, so that we can do this presentation in person again. Any other questions? Then I would like to thank everybody for coming. Thank you, Hugh, very much. It was terrific. And we will see each other again tomorrow for our anniversary dinner. For those that do not live with us currently, we do have the presentation center open, and would love to invite you to see Natasha there now if you wish. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Don't forget to have a look at the pictures over there. Again, no bid is too low or too high. It all goes to charity. There's lots of exciting photos. And again, go and have a visit with Natasha in the presentation center. She's the lovely one standing there in the middle, waving. Thank you, everybody. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, that was fun.
Well, congratulations, and wonderful.
Yeah.
Sure, 4:30 and 6:30. Are you going to be
Yes.
Sure.
Yes. And Tony will be there, our CEO. He's going to say a few words on both cities as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. So we never work on I will be at both, but I will not dine before 31.
Okay.
But I'll be there. Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor.
Kelly, somebody took my walker somewhere.
Oh, yeah, let me get him. Here you go, mademoiselle.
See you tomorrow, all dressed up. They are right there.
Right, I just had to wear.
And I can start there. Of course, yeah. Let's do it. That was very good. Now I want to go there.
Oh, you know what? I can do that. I actually really like it.
Which direction do you want me to go? Starting over here?
You take the back. Yeah, take your hat.
I have one, but it has the hat in it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I like this.
Yeah. Yeah, and in the summer, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And I agree. Great day.
That was great, Jessica. I love you. Just amazing.
And I do have a really good quality video that we can watch upstairs
Okay.
where the pictures are very nice and
Oh,
bright.
yeah, we'll do that.
So we'll do that.
Got it.
But really,
Yep.
I'm gonna do this part. Yeah.
And I love you.
Alright. Thanks for pointing that out. That's the way I showed you. Am I doing it again or is this all right?
You're good.
You know what?
Yeah. I mean, the picture does. Yeah, everything else is great.
So Jessica, they all want to do the multi-purpose room, see it again.
yeah. Well, I saw it, so I just have to find the link and put it up.
Yeah.
I should be able to do it maybe tomorrow. Let me see what I can do. While I'm setting up for the window.
No big deal.
I'm waiting to bid on that last picture.
Oh yeah,
I'm really saucy.
yeah, and snipe it, yeah,
It's really neat. Just people standing on the pier.
yeah. Okay, so that's called sniping. You're
Well,
like
am I
gonna
being
get it
naughty?
like right at the. No, it's not. It's a great strategy to get what
On
you
the
want.
way
Yeah.
into my car.
No, it's a great strategy.
I do like art.
That last one is really cool. Yeah, there were a few that there's so many to choose from. There was one like a few ladies and stuff too.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Do you remember Jackie sending the picture of the cows in Switzerland?
Yes.
So I sent one of those to a painter that I like in Victoria
Uh-huh.
and asked her if she would paint it.
Oh wow.
And she said, yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
So,
That'll be cool.
She said, "No, I'll get back to you."
Nice.
What else? Tell me what's next.
I sanitized all of Andy's stuff.
Do we have a garbage or a pile? A little something?
How many does it take? And then you would have been standing. I would have been. Isn't that amazing?
Take care.
Okay, you too.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Where did you find those scissors?
Somebody, I think that.
Those are some serious scissors. Yeah, they're from your kitchen.
That's right.
Sorry. It's sharp. It worked really well. I was a little nervous because I thought it was control, but then.
Yeah, I'm not really thrilled about this stuff. It was great.
We got a card. Oh, okay. Oh, please go to the gym. Anna, how did you get here? I think so. Yes. Hey, Arm, let's go up here, right?
Let's go to the gym.
Yeah.
But I don't know if Raina needs them anymore. I think they can all get out.
Actually, Ian, just wait just a minute. If she wants them, I don't know whether they'll go on to the second one.
Oh, oh yeah, the projector, yeah.
She gave me that, the projector. She gave me the ribbon.
You'll see it on just over here. I got the scissor.
And then I had the easels. I think that was it. The ribbon, the projector, the easels. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Okay, so that's good. So I'm gonna take these into the sales center now. Because I gotta go get my stuff.
We all did.
I try to
It's
stay
okay,
out.
we all look amazing like this.
Yeah, right.
Good luck.
And I have to put this
Yeah.
down. Jessica, are these yours?
Those are Stuart.
They're whose?
Stuart needs to take them inside. I can't right now.
Okay, and then we need to help you take the tent down.
Yeah. I gotta grab all the quick things and put all the shirts on.
Okay.